What's up guys, Metal571 here today, and I'm going to talk about the ZMF Blackwood. So what is this headphone intended for? This is not really a professional headphone by any means, really. It's more of an enjoyment, closed back planar magnetic T50RP mod. T50RP Mark II to be more precise, as far as I can tell from this one. And it's really just it's a very carefully crafted headphone, as the ear cups have been completely replaced with this wood, this Blackwood, which is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, woods available. I don't remember what the scale is called, but Zach will tell you. These are made by a guy who goes by the name of Zach at ZMF Headphones, or at least they're designed by him, in correlation with Vibro Labs, and the ear cups are made there. So with that out of the way, to start off and talk about the hardware and the build quality, which by the way is basically about as good as a headphone can be in this price range. I believe these run around $6.99. Not exactly a cheap headphone we're looking at here, but it is really, as it does say on ZMF's website, heirloom quality. Indeed it is. So the headband is this piece of rubber, actually, that's underneath this, which you'll see it says Fostex on it, because that is the original headphone. What he does is he takes the Fostex headphones, rips off the ear cups, replaces them with these wooden ear cups, and then modifies with damping and all kinds of stuff in here, in the inside here. He put some modifications in there to make the driver sound a lot more to his liking, and many people's liking, I might add. We'll get to that in the sound section. So you get that. The headband adjusts like this. These guys go up and down so you can rest it on your head. The pilot pad up here, which I believe is optional, is definitely something I would recommend, as it's much softer than the harder, inflexible, well, somewhat flexible, but not exactly padded original headband that's on here. The cables are mini XLR. I believe this is this may just be a random cable, I believe. Probably not exactly the one that comes with the headphone, but I know there's at least one or two other cable options. You can visit his website and take a look at that, which I'll link later in the description. There's also a couple different options for the pads, I believe. These, I believe, are the cowhide pads. The cowhide pads are very coarse. These are a little less coarse, but they're not as coarse as the lambskin pads, which I have on an Omni that I have right now that's in the process of being reviewed. I did do the Vibro review on this channel before. You can check that out as well. These are a different headphone from the Vibro, and a lot of that is also because of the different wood used and the ear cups. Instead of an American wood, this uses a Blackwood. Now, as far as comfort goes, I wouldn't say it's a mixed bag, but I think it depends on the person again. Now, for one thing, these ear cups are definitely big enough and definitely deep enough to fit basically anybody's ears with no problem right off the bat. And the quality of the leather being used here, this actual leather, not fake leather, is very high and doesn't really cause your ears to sweat like the cheap stuff that where your side of your head ends up sticking to the pads and stuff. That doesn't really happen with these. It's a much better quality leather, and so comfort is very good, with the exception that, of course, being a planar magnetic headphone, these are kind of heavy, and so over a long period of time you may get a little fatigue from wearing them, and they clamp a decent amount to keep them on your head. And the pleather pad, the pilot pad up here, supports you on the top of your head. So I didn't have any issues actually wearing these for very long periods at work, for example, but it's definitely something that I think some people may have an issue with. Now, this is not really ZMF headphones' fault. Many planar magnetic headphones are just weighty. They just weigh a lot, and it's something that can be inherent to the design. So with that, let's talk about what these sound like. Now, I could talk about this relative to the Vibros, but in normal fashion, I'll compare them to the HD600 with my EQ first. I do plan on doing another video in the future talking about neutrality and what I think sounds natural, as opposed to what some measurements will say. And that's a whole nother discussion. I'm not going to get into that right now, but compared to what I perceive as natural, that's how I describe headphones. So the bass on these is quite awesome. Definitely extends low. I feel like there's still a little bit of roll off, but it's not until you get down to like 30 or 20 hertz that you really start to hear it. It's not like these will go forever, way out to 0 hertz, at least the way I hear it. With some songs with very, very deep sub bass, they don't produce it quite linearly, in my opinion. But that said, as usual, these are planar magnetic headphones. They do a really good job with bass, better than most dynamics I've heard for sure, and I enjoy them. Now, the bass quantity of these is certainly it's a matter of taste. Vibros. The Vibro has much more bass than this, especially with all of the openings here open, which I have mine set to. You can customize the amount of bass by covering these guys up one at a time. There's 3 holes on each ear cup at the bottom here, and that will reduce the amount of bass more and more the more bass holes here are covered. And when they're all covered, you get kind of a little bit more into the mid bass and upper bass, kind of a warmth to it. But I left them all open, and I still think they could have a little bit more bass, but this is really a preference thing, because I listen to a lot of electronic music, and you can hear the bass no problem with these, but it doesn't punch at you too strongly, and that's kind of a good thing, because these are meant to be more of a neutral pair of headphones. But other than that, really the bass doesn't sound colored in any way. There's no like obvious dips anywhere. Pretty much covers the gamut just fine across the board. So the mid-range is, I think the mid-range on these is what a lot of people will call neutral, but not what I would call neutral. I think it's a little bit forward, even around the usual 3.5K peak that should be there on uncompensated measurements. I think these are just a little bit forward there, and they come off as sounding just a little bit brash. With some distorted guitars, it can sound a little bit edgy when you really crank it. If you don't listen very loud, it won't bother you at all, but I listen at all ranges of volume just to get an idea of where the peaks are. Somehow it's a little bit easier for me to tell where the peaks are when I really crank things up. So that's what I do to evaluate that. But yeah, otherwise the mid-range sounds very uncolored. Again, keeping with the neutrality aspect, it's a pretty flat headphone by measurement standards. Although I think there could have been a little bit more detail here. That may be just a limitation of the design. I think that I've heard planers that have faster mid-range with more detailed retrieval like an HE500, but for a closed headphone it's quite good, and it can be fixed a little bit with EQ, which I'll talk about later anyway. So the treble on these are well known to have a little bit of a peak. I hear it at around 7K on this pair. It may vary slightly from unit to unit, but there's a small sibilance-ish peak there. It's very fast, it decays quickly, so it doesn't really bother you, and it's hard to notice at first, but if you run the right tracks through, you'll hear that these sound slightly metallic, very slightly, in the treble. But other than that, I don't really hear any peaks in the treble, and in fact, the top octave sounds pretty rolled off and smooth, although there's a little bit more detail way up top than the Vibro has, so you get a little bit more air with these, but I still feel like they're lacking a lot of air. They definitely have that smooth sound that the Vibro has up in the treble. It's inoffensive for the most part, except for the 7K peak and then the 3.5K peak in the mids. Overall, as a sound signature, definitely inoffensive and fairly neutral, but I still think there's a little bit of peakiness there. And that's kind of something that probably can't be corrected. It may be an inherent issue with the way the T50RP drivers are, from what I've read. Although Zach is able to tune them the way you'd like, and there are some additional changes he can make to the modifications. If you don't like the way your pair sounds, you can still change them a bit. And then, of course, after that, there's always EQ on top of it. And So that's how I hear them. Soundstage wise is the huge improvement over the Vibros, though. In my opinion, these have a spectacular soundstage for a closed back headphone, and even for any headphone. It has excellent imaging and separation. Better than my HD600, absolutely. Mark my words on that one. Definitely better imaging than the HD600, which I compared right up back to back with this thing. And the HD600 sounded like it was either out here or was kind of in here. I think I said the same thing in my HD600 review. It sounds kind of 3 blob-ish in terms of like the direction that sounds appear to be coming from. But with this guy, you got a lot better. You can really hear the separation in the channels in the mix better, and they really separate out. And I like to call it kind of a holographic effect. I don't know how I come up with these stupid adjectives, but it's got really good imaging, guys. It's got really good imaging, and it's got a fantastic soundstage width for a closed back headphone. Probably, I'd wager it's probably the best closed back headphone soundstage in its price range, I'm sure. Now, there are better headphones out there, namely the Audeze LCD-XC, but most people don't really want to pay $1,800 for a headphone, and if you don't want to pay that, this is a lot easier to swallow on your wallet, definitely. So that's what I think about the sound. As far as EQ goes, I'm going to say this right out, and although these were sent to me, and thanks to Zach for sending these to me for review, I'm not going to automatically praise everything about them. I'm going to tell you right up front, I don't prefer these without EQ, as is. I don't really like them that much on an overall scale. I really like the soundstage. That's awesome. I love the comfort. That's a fantastic comfort. But I still think they sound a little bit edgy in the upper mids and the low treble. And thankfully, with some advent of some EQ, if you apply that, you get some spectacular stuff. You can bring out the air region of the treble quite a bit, and you can bring that down the upper mids and the low treble if you're like me, and that's how you prefer to listen to them. And to me, that actually expanded the soundstage and made it even more obvious, as if the upper mids were covering up some of the imaging. I don't know. That's just what I heard when I did that to them. But wow, these are really, really good for a fully closed back headphone. No question. But I wouldn't listen to them personally without some kind of EQ. And that goes for most headphones. So this is probably kind of more of an opinion thing. I'm not saying that they sound like crap. They don't. They sound really awesome as an overall package in the price range. Definitely worthy of their price tag. But I prefer a slightly different sound. But not much. I didn't have to change them very much to get them to the way I like them. So there you have it. Now again, against the Vibros, these have a lot less bass. Really good bass extension. Not perfect, but definitely better than the Vibro, I think, and they have a little bit more air, and there's a little bit less of that low treble peak. So they're more refined, they're more neutral, and they also have a way better soundstage from what I remember with the Vibro. So that's what you get with the Blackwood. They're not as dark, they're not as they don't have as aggressive as a low treble, and they have a much less aggressive bass also overall. And that's what you get with these guys, the ZMF Blackwood. So stay tuned. I'll be talking about the Omni, which I also have in now, which is related to these. And I'll just leave. I won't give you any spoilers. I'll let you wait for that review too. Alright guys, if you have any questions as usual, let me know in the comments. I'll answer when I get a chance. And if you have Equalizer APO or any other EQ tool, I'm going to post some settings in the description so you can check it out and let me know what you think. If any of you guys do use EQ, I'd really like to know what you think about some of my EQ profiles. I'm going to start putting those on all the videos, and we'll see what you guys think about that. Alright, thanks again to ZMF Headphones for providing the unit, and I'll see you guys in the next video.